Good morning, brethren. Welcome to our last devotional of another week. Psalm 39 is where we are, and this morning we're going to be thinking about verses 4 and 5. Very interesting verses because how one takes them and understands them really depends on their connection to the first three verses. We saw in our first study, looking at those verses, that the psalmist at that time was deeply troubled about what was happening in his own life, or possibly in the life of the nation at that time. So troubled that inwardly he resolved that he wasn't going to actually speak about how he was feeling to anyone. And the reason for that was he didn't want what he said to be a cause of dishonouring the Lord or giving his and the Lord's enemies cause to mock and rejoice the Lord's people. And so the question is, are verses 3 and 4 spoken in an ongoing complaining spirit? Are they spoken in a sort of petulant attitude? Is the psalmist saying, Lord, make me know my end and the measure of my days what they are? In other words, Lord, how soon am I going to die? The sooner, the better. Because of what's going on in my life, I want to die. You see, the Hebrew word know, make me to know my end, it can often be translated experience, to know by actually experiencing the thing referred to, in this case, death. The psalmist could well be expressing an impatient utterance that expresses a desire for his life to come to an end. Things are just so bad, Lord, make me know my end. I'd be better off dead. Wonder, have you ever felt like that? Have things ever become so difficult for you in life, so full of hardship and sorrow, and such a challenge to your faith as a Christian that you felt, I'd be better off dead? Life can feel like that at times. Those who are prone to melancholy, to depression, to pessimism, are most likely to allow their thoughts to wander down that dark and dangerous pathway. And these words of the psalmist could well have been written to express a feeling of despair with regards to life. Here's the point. Such thoughts are not incompatible with being a true child of God. God's children do at times have those thoughts. Most commentators, however, explain these two verses as being the psalmist's desire to put the hardships that he's experiencing into the proper context. The context of knowing that life passes quickly and that, like life itself, his troubles will very quickly pass. The words of verses 4 and 5 therefore remind us of the brevity and the frailty of life. Lord, make me to know my end, and what is the measure of my days? Let me know how fleeting I am. I have to say, this is something that has profoundly influenced my thinking in recent days. When I was much younger, in my teens and early 20s, people in their 40s seemed old, and those in their 60s seemed ancient. And to me, the thought of being old seemed so distant, such a long way off. One could hardly imagine living all those years, and retirement seemed aeons away. But the reality of life, of course, is that those years pass, or seem to pass, very, very quickly. before you know it, those little babies that you and your wife held in your arms, those children with whom you played and fooled around, have now grown up. They've now left home, and they've now established their own adult life. And they themselves are quickly heading to where you are now standing, the land of the old people, the people in their 50s and their 60s and their 70s. In verse 5, the psalmist says, "You have made my life as only a few handbreadths." The King James gives it in the singular. "You've made my life a mere handbreadth." A handbreadth was one of the shortest measurements in the ancient world. It consisted of the width of 4 fingers. Psalmist is saying life is so very, very short. And he emphasizes it again at the end of that 5th verse. All mankind stand as a mere breath. You remember the words of Job when he says, "My days are quicker than a weaver's shuttle." We don't use weaver's shuttles just the same today, although if you go and see it on an industrial scale, you'll understand what Job meant. The shuttle moved back and forward extremely quickly. James says, "What is your life? It's like a mist that appears for a little while and then it disappears." Brethren, life is very, very short. Even assuming you live into your retirement years, and none of us are guaranteed that, those years that seem so distant now will come around very, very quickly. Therefore, make the most of the time God gives you. Live each day for the Lord. And when our days are over, we will not be able to serve the Lord on this earth any longer. So, while we do have life on this earth, let us serve the Lord wholeheartedly. You'll all be familiar, or many of you will be familiar with the little ditty with which I'm going to finish. Just one life, it'll soon be past, but what is done for God will last. Have a great weekend and a blessed Sabbath day.